What's happening, y'all? I'm Abby Martin, and this is a break in the set. So it's no secret that if you want to be president in this country, you better be religious. After all, it wouldn't be a State of the Union speech unless it ended with "God bless America." The results of a new Pew poll are still pretty eye-opening when it comes to how entrenched religion and politics really are in the U.S. See, potential voters were asked about their feelings concerning various traits in a presidential candidate, and wouldn't you know, being an atheist was chosen as the worst presidential attribute. That's right, a whopping 53% of respondents said that they were less likely to support an atheist candidate. In fact, atheism ranked even worse than never holding office, having an extramarital affair, and being really old. It's also important to note that disturbingly, but unsurprisingly, I guess, being gay or lesbian ranked near the bottom of the list as well. But let's take a look at the flip side. Let's look at the most admired qualities of a potential president. Leading the pack is serving in the military. The ridiculous 43% say military service would make them more likely to vote for the candidate. Being a governor or business executive, also apparently very admirable qualities. But right behind those traits is being an evangelical Christian, with 21% of respondents saying that would make them more likely to vote for the candidate. Wow. Tells us a lot about why America is the way it is. Listen, no matter what your views are on religion, it's a truly sad commentary that the religious or non-religious persuasions of our politicians are still such a primary concern of the American voting populace. So if you think we should stop treating our elections like a PayPal conclave, then it's time to break the set.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
And once again, we put something on the air. It's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait, do not answer that.
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.
What we need is to question more and to keep it uncensored, real and raw. My simple mission is to change the globe. I'ma do it with this passion and fire with tone. These words are hard hitting, you're watching your neck, but you need to tune in because we're breaking the set. Breaking the set. Breaking the set.
Well, the state of Oregon has had quite an impressive month. And it all started last Thursday when Portland officials announced that the entire city is divesting from Walmart. City press release stated that, quote, the last of the city's Walmart bonds will mature in April 2016, at which point the city will have eliminated a total of $36 million invested in the company. This announcement makes Portland the first city and the largest entity to take on the corporation. Portland says the decision was made after officials determined the business was not, quote, socially responsible. You can say that again. Now, Portland's divestment will hardly make a dent in Walmart's profits, considering that the mega company has the equivalent yearly earnings to the 23rd largest economy in the world. Nonetheless, this move makes a clear statement that Portland citizens are refusing to fund a company that thrives off corporate welfare and takes clear advantage of its employees. And Walmart's appalling record when it comes to workers is hardly a secret. For example, take accusations made on behalf of 1.6 million women who attempted to form a class action lawsuit alleging that their male counterparts enjoyed higher salaries and faster climbs up the corporate ladder in the company. And while women are still fighting Walmart for equal pay, its workers across the board are making near poverty level wages, barely scraping by on $25,000 a year. As a result, according to a 2013 study released by congressional Democrats, many Walmart workers are forced to enroll in government programs like food stamps just to pay their bills. This costs the average taxpayer about $5,800 per employee per year. Wow! And all of this while the heirs to the Wal-t empire have more wealth than the poorest 42% of Americans. You know, all of this makes me wonder why Portland is the first and only city to divest from this insanely crooked business model. But amazingly, the Beaver State isn't just taking on mega corporations. On Monday, a federal court ruled that the state's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, making Oregon the 18th state to legalize gay marriage, right before Pennsylvania. And because Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum does not plan on fighting the ruling, same-sex couples across Oregon are now free to get hitched. So congratulations to the people of Oregon. Here's to hoping that cities and states across the country will follow your lead. One of the biggest mysteries from 9/11 was the unusual stock trading activity that took place immediately prior to the tragedy. According to CBS, a, quote, extraordinary number of trades bet that the stock price of American Airlines would fail. Now, put options are bet daily, but what raised red flags on September 10th was that more than 80% of the orders were that the stock would fall. And CBS sources say that they'd never even seen that type of imbalance before. Former Wall Street banker and host of the Kaiser Report, Max Kaiser, recently wrote an op-ed on this very subject. He joined me earlier to explain exactly how this all went down.
The airline option puts were trading as if an airplane had just exploded, but that trading pattern was happening days before the event. That's how we know that there was something very fishy going on. I've been talking about this for a number of years, but importantly, right now, a new book has come out by Jim Rickards. It's called The Death of Money, and in Chapter 1, he spells out explicitly that he had an eyewitness account in Langley, in the CIA headquarters, of the CIA monitoring insider transactions related to 9/11. In the book, he suggests that those trades come from overseas. I can tell you that my conversations with bankers on Wall Street tell me that they themselves were trading and that this information came out of Alex Brown, which is now owned by Deutsche Bank, and specifically Buzzy Krongard, who was then running, who was the assistant deputy of the CIA, who had just moved from Alex Brown, the brokerage firm, and the missing money that nobody ever collected was in an Alex Brown account. So I can add to what Rickards explains in his book that he confirms that there was, in fact, insider trading. I can add my piece to the puzzle, and I can tell you that it's related to Buzzy Krongard, it's related to Cantor Fitzgerald, and it's related to everything going on in Alex Brown, and brokers who could have escaped, presumably. We can only imagine that they stayed behind to trade these put options, and I think that's a sad commentary on America today.
You've said that millions of dollars worth of the profits from the insider trading is uncollected in an Alex Brown account just down the road from the CIA headquarters. How do we know that it was uncollected? I mean, isn't the whole point to collect that millions of dollars and then flee or put it offshore somewhere?
That information has not been talked about widely, particularly in the U.S. press, where, of course, the 9/11 episode has become a huge tourist attraction with the new museum at the Twin Towers where they formerly stood. You can go to the gift shop and buy all kinds of 9/11 gifts and memorabilia if you want to have something to tack on your wall or bring home to your kids and tell them all about the great fun experience you had down there in Lower Manhattan at the gift shop at the 9/11 Museum. So nothing is beyond reproach from these folks. They will monetize anything. They'll sell their mother for a nickel. They'll blow each other up for a penny. That's the danger. That's why the world is rejecting the U.S. Philosophy of doing foreign policy. That's why Russia, China, Iran created the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to get out of the dollar. The dollar is the world reserve currency, but now that's finished.
Really what this shows is that the incompetence theory is really flawed, Max. When people actually did make money off foreknowledge, and then you're telling me the political establishment just had no clue?
This is something that it's just not going to be talked about on the evening news in the U.S. because it would open up a huge self-examination. It would open up some introspection. There would have to be some thought as to why those events occurred in the way that they did, and that might stop the U.S. from its current policy of basically doubling down on starting wars all over the world to pay off this mounting multi-hundred trillion, quadrillion in debt that they keep accumulating that has to be paid off by starting wars. That's why the U.S. starts wars, is to try to keep that debt ball in the air. This is why you've got an enormous problem right now. There's only 3 countries in the world of any importance that are not part of the U.S. Federal Reserve banking system: China, Iran, Russia. So now we're at the point in history where those 3 countries are saying, no, we're not going to be manipulated by the Federal Reserve. We're going to do deals outside of the dollar. We're going to do them in our own currencies. And this is the end of the U.S. dollar empire. Before, the U.S. dollar was the British Empire and the pound. Then they moved to the U.S. and the U.S. dollar. Now it's moving east to some either a combination of Chinese, Russian currencies or something possibly backed by gold. Russia's been buying gold aggressively every month for years. They just quadrupled their purchases of gold because they know that the dollar is going to be completely, destroyed as people wake up to the fact that oil and gas, the price of oil and gas is going to be priced in something other than the U.S. dollar. So we're going to see in the U.S. inflation like we haven't seen in quite some time. Price of gas could double or triple in the U.S. And obviously that's a completely different scenario economically than what we've had for decades.
Yeah, it's a scary trend, Max. We're hearing a lot about high-frequency trading after Michael Lewis's book Flash Boys came out. Compare your time as a Wall Street trader to the kind of scheming that's going on now with this sort of technology.
Well, you're right in that the technology makes it possible to commit fraud faster and more rapidly. High-frequency trading, it's very similar to if you went to your neighbor and you stuck a tube, a hose into the gas tank of their car and you siphoned gas out of their car. That's kind of what high-frequency trading is all about. Firms like Goldman Sachs, they put a server right next to the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, and as trades come in, they scalp those trades as they're being bought or sold for pennies here, pennies there. They're just siphoning cash out. They're just stealing money. Lloyd Blankfein at Goldman Sachs will tell you he's making a market. He's adding liquidity. That would be like me saying after I siphon gas out of your car that, no, I'm making a market in gas. You know, it's just a ludicrous statement.
That was Max Kaiser, host of the Kaiser Report. Coming up, I'll talk about a new disease created entirely by the corporate media. Stay tuned.
Yeah, I take no prisoners, you call it aggressive, but all I see is lies coming out in your message. I keep it audacious, speaking the facts. We break the paradigm with truth and tact. The people don't need to be fed propaganda, spoon-fed fabrications and slander. What we need is to question more and to keep
What are your thoughts on what's been going on in Washington?
Well, it's a mess, Larry. I mean, the whole country is being scoffed at and laughed at.
Enough is enough.
The media, the candidates, the corporatocracy, covering issues that actually affect you and me doesn't do too much for ad revenue.
Biotech agriculture giant takes on a 76-year-old American farmer based in Indiana.
How much fallout do you think this is going to create for the CIA?
Do you think this is what's triggering the crisis?
America's the largest economy in the world. It's also the largest debtor nation in the history of the world.
Breaking the Set is mostly about alternatives to the status quo, but one that gave real alternatives a voice.
One minute they were working toward the American dream, the next they were just trying to survive the night. It's time for Americans and lawmakers in Washington to wake up and start talking about the real causes of poverty in America.
If you've been watching local news in San Francisco lately, you might have heard about a terrible new disease affecting America's urban youth.
Many kids in the inner city are suffering from something you would never expect. Wendy Takuda is here tonight with a new health and psychological problem that teachers have been seeing a lot. Wendy?
They have been. Even the Centers for Disease Control says that these kids often live in virtual war zones. And doctors at Harvard say they actually suffer from a more complex form of PTSD. Some call it hood disease.
Actually, Wendy, only you are calling it hood disease. Yes, once again, faced with an opportunity to report and examine a serious topic that's well worthy of coverage, corporate media instead chose to turn the issue of inner city mental health into sensationalized, race-baiting garbage. See, the creation of the term hood disease comes from new numbers released by the Centers for Disease Control, showing that 30% of inner city kids suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. But instead of using this recognized medical term that applies to every other person with the condition, a new special version of PTSD has been created just for young minorities. In an article for the magazine Ebony, Berkeley University professor Amani Nuru Jeter even goes as far as saying, quote, to call it hood disease suggests that there's something specific about living in the hood. And have we even defined what that means? What about other areas that are predominantly populated by low-income whites? I think there's a spin on the idea. It veers toward blaming the victim. Indeed. And this pervasive mindset is everywhere you look in this country. Because, of course, it's simple for outsiders to see the level of violence in cities from Chicago to Detroit and merely dismiss it as all inherent to minority communities. And despite the enormous amount of media coverage of mass shootings, so-called black-on-black crime rarely gets anything more than a 30-second superficial spot on the local news because, hey, that's just another day in the hood. It's easier to look at these issues in a vacuum without understanding the institutionalized and systematic reasons why the epidemic of physical and psychological warfare is happening in the first place. Consider that according to the NAACP, African Americans are incarcerated at a rate that's 6 times higher than whites. Blacks and Latinos make up a quarter of the population, yet comprise a whopping 58% of the prisoners in 2008. Not to mention sentencing disparities between crack and cocaine use, which currently stands at 18-1. Or that 35% of black children in grades 7 through 12 have been suspended or expelled from school at some point in their lives, compared to 15% of whites. These are just a few of the factors that make it so difficult to escape from a criminal justice structure that results in poverty, desperation, unemployment, and most importantly, a cycle of endless violence. Because once you're in the system, it's nearly impossible to get out. So maybe instead of resorting to convenient and oversimplified phrases like hood disease, we should realize that the real disease is a social cancer that we're all responsible for. This week, disturbing footage was released of Israeli Defense Forces gunning down 2 unarmed Palestinian teenagers when they were simply participating in a protest. Their names were Muhammad Abu Dhahar and Nadim Nawara. And the outright murder of these 2 boys highlights the impunity with which the IDF operates and raises questions as to whether or not the soldiers responsible will ever be held accountable for the crime. Well, to help tackle the issue of Israeli impunity and the daily struggles millions of Palestinians face daily, earlier I spoke to Miko Piled, son of a former IDF general and grandson of one of Israel's founding fathers. He's also the author of The General's Son. I began by asking Milo to describe his own, quote, Palestinian treatment recently at an airport in Tel Aviv.
There's a sticker that you get as soon as you go in, and the sticker has a barcode and a serial number. And the serial number that starts with a 6 is the one that raises the red flag. That's the mark, yeah. And I've never gotten a number 6. Palestinians always talk about that number, you know, quite often. And so at every point between when you walk into the airport to the terminal until you're actually on the plane, you know, if you're if you're an Israeli, you don't notice. You just go from one place to another until you show up. But when you've got that number 6, they scan the barcode, and as soon as number 6 comes up, you know, then they hold the phone, you know, hold everything, call a supervisor, do a special inspection, do another round of questioning, another round of bag checks. They open the laptop a few extra times. They insisted on doing a body search, which I refused, and I, you know, told them they had no right to. I mean, if they couldn't treat a Palestinian different than they do me, I mean, neither one of us has a criminal record or a terrorist record. Why should we take our pants off?
Yeah, that's insane.
So they had us go through a metal detector a few extra times and that sort of thing, and made us wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. It's just horrible. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. And it only happens if you're a Palestinian.
I wanted to ask you about Rachel Corrie's case. Her parents finally got that appeal. The Supreme Court heard the case today. Of course, we won't hear the ruling for a couple months. What do you think the outcome will be?
I don't think there's going to be any different outcome than what they've had so far. As over the years where we've seen the Israeli army, Israeli police shooting protesters, whether they're Palestinians or not, they're never held accountable. They're never taken to court. I mean, there's a shield that protects the soldiers and the police from any kind of legal action. And the Israeli courts and the Israeli judicial system has always supported the military, has always supported the army, and I don't think that's going to change.
I can't help but think, would we even know who Rachel Corrie was if she was Palestinian? I mean,
Probably
the only reason we know her name.
Probably not. And also, I mean, we might have known their name, but it would have been forgotten after 24 hours. But I think that her parents deserve, you know, all the respect. You know, God bless them. They're wonderful people. They work so hard, and they're demanding justice. And they're going against the stream and against, you know, the system there.
Two incredible people really fighting on the ground there in Jerusalem constantly. Miko, I wanted to bring this to the horrific executions of the two Palestinian teenagers, 15-year-old Muhammad Abu Tar, 17-year-old Nadim Nuwara. Horrific footage here of just getting brutally gunned down, merely protesting, just walking around with backpacks. Can you describe the details surrounding this case?
Well, it's similar to other cases where there are protests and the Israeli army shoots to kill. I mean, they shoot to kill. It happened in Abi Saleh with Mustafa Tamimi. It happened, you know, countless times. I remember Mustafa Tamimi because it happened on my birthday a couple of years ago. So it's a day I'll never forget. And they know they're not going to be held accountable. Sometimes it happens during what they call clashes, which are, you know, protests, legitimate protests. In this case, this was both Nakba Day, when Palestinians commemorate their catastrophe, and it was in front of Ofer prison, which is where Palestinians are tortured, interrogated, and held. And we have a hunger strike that began with hundreds of strikers, and now thousands. The entire body of Palestinian political prisoners are on hunger strike. So it was in light of all of that, and they were demanding justice, and the Israeli army shoots to kill. They have no fear.
And the IDF has said, even this morning, they were still saying that they don't have live ammunition. They're opening an investigation. But Miko, you're talking about accountability. I cannot help but bring up this shocking statistic. According to Haaretz, the IDF has killed over 5,000 Palestinians since 2000, 1,500 of which have been children, yet only 6 soldiers have been convicted for these offenses over the last 14 years, according to the Military Police Criminal Investigations Department. And I'm telling you that in those 6 instances, some of them are just a slap on the wrist, 3 months probation, etc. How is this lack of accountability even possible?
Well, it's possible in a state which is a racist, inherently a racist state, where Palestinian lives don't count for anything. This is the reality in Israel. It's a racist state. It's a racist regime. Palestinians are not counted. Their lives don't count. This is why they're treated the way they are at the airport. This is why they're treated the way they are when they're shot in, you know, whether they're children or adults, it makes no difference, doing mostly peaceful protests. And even if they're not peaceful, then we're talking about rocks versus guns and tanks. This is why Palestinian communities inside Israel, Israeli citizens, are neglected, and over 50% are below the poverty line. It's an entire system. It's an entire racist system. And you did that wonderful piece about Israel being an apartheid state. You hit it right. You hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what it is. And these are all the different symptoms of a racist apartheid regime.
Let's talk about what Muhammad and Nadim were protesting, which is this insane amount of prisoners kept indefinitely, no charges, no trial. What kind of offenses are we talking about here that could land a Palestinian in jail indefinitely?
Well, what they're protesting now, and what they protested in the past in hunger strikes, is what they call administrative detention, where Palestinians are held without charge. Now, we're talking about the military judicial system, where the bar is set very, very low. Now, these Palestinians, hundreds of them, are held indefinitely, even though no charges have been brought against them. In other words, even the military judicial system, which with its very low bar, found nothing with which to charge these people, yet they are held in prison indefinitely, beaten, tortured, and so forth. So the protest is against that, you know, and it began with several hundreds of them, the actual administrative detainees, on hunger strike, and then after that, about a week or two later, the entire body, some 5,000 Palestinian prisoners, have started a hunger strike. This is a massive hunger strike.
Yeah, and Samer Sawi was, of course, one of the most famous hunger strikers. He was released, but now his family is being harassed. His sister's awaiting trial. She's on hunger strike now. Talk about that case.
Well, his family's being harassed. She's being harassed. She's very outspoken. She's an advocate for Palestinian rights, particularly prisoners' rights. Samer holds I think the record for the longest number of days, or the most number of days, being on hunger strike and surviving.
It's insane.
It's insane. I remember I was in Belfast standing by Bobby Sands' grave when Samer was still in jail, and everybody was praying that his fate would not be the same as Bobby Sands and the other Irishman who died. And now she's held in prison. Again, administrative detention. In other words, they can bring no charges against her, and they're holding her. And now the trial has been postponed some 9 or 10 months, and she's supposed to just accept it. And the hunger strike is a powerful tool. It's a painful tool. I mean, the pain and the suffering they go through and their families go through. And the system doesn't care. In other words, the Israeli certainly doesn't care. The Israeli judicial system is not supporting them. And the world seems to not care either, which is even more shocking.
The world seems to just think if you're a Palestinian, then you are a terrorist or you're some sort of an enemy combatant. Really unfortunate generalization there, Miko. According to a report by the Masawa Advocacy Center for Arab Citizens in Israel, Arab families living in Israel 4 times likelier than their Jewish counterparts to live in poverty. I want you to talk about the factors that you think are contributing to this extreme disparity.
The Israeli Knesset has passed dozens of laws that particularly and specifically target them, whether it's buying land, whether it's development and so forth, job opportunities, you name it. Now, besides that, the whole environment of racism and discrimination that they live, in which they live, it isn't always an issue of law, sometimes just an issue of the reality. So their lands have been confiscated, so they have no room to grow. They have not a single dollar, or you'd be hard-pressed to find a single dollar ever invested in anything in these communities, nor permits given for them to build. They're restricted in terms of employment and education and so forth. The Israeli secret police is always breathing down their necks. Even crime is not solved. I mean, I was just there, for a few days, and I went to a wedding 2 days before the wedding of a friend in a Palestinian town inside Israel. A man was shot to death in broad daylight. The police will not come to investigate, and this is one out of dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of cases, where the police will not come in and investigate any kind of crime. So this is the kind of neglect, and this is the kind of reality in which these people live.
Author of The General's Son, social activist, really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's our show, you guys. Join me again tomorrow when I break the set all over again. A presidential candidate, and wouldn't you know, being an atheist was chosen as the worst presidential attribute. That's right, a whopping 53% of respondents said that they were less likely to support an atheist candidate. In fact, atheism ranked even worse than never holding office, having an extramarital affair, and being really old. It's also important to note that disturbingly, but unsurprisingly, I guess, being gay or lesbian ranked near the bottom of the list as well. But let's take a look at the flip side. Let's look at the most admired quality that the religious or non-religious persuasions of our politicians are still such a primary concern of the American voting populace. So if you think we should stop treating our elections like a PayPal conclave, then it's time to break the set.
It was a terrible mistake, and we're working very hard to make up for it.
And once again, we put something on the air. It's a flat-out lie.
Have you ever had sex with Governor Rick Perry?
No, wait. Do not answer that.
Of a potential president. Leading the pack is serving in the military. The ridiculous 43% say military service would make them more likely to vote for the candidate. Being a governor or business executive, also apparently very admirable qualities. But right behind those traits is being an evangelical Christian, with 21% of respondents saying that would make them more likely to vote for the candidate. Wow. Tells us a lot about why America is the way it is. Listen, no matter what your views are on religion, it's a truly sad commentary. What's happening, y'all? I'm Abby Martin, and this is a break in the set. So it's no secret that if you want to be president in this country, you better be religious. After all, it wouldn't be a State of the Union speech unless it ended with God bless America. The results of a new Pew poll are still pretty eye-opening when it comes to how entrenched religion and politics really are in the U.S. See, potential voters were asked about their feelings concerning various traits of...
I want you to watch what we're about to do because you've never seen anything like this on television.